Well, hi, Joe. Thank you for hanging out with me today. This is a fun
Sure.
episode for me and you to do because we've been friends for a long time and we've got a cool project to talk about today. But before we dive into that, I'll give you a moment to share with our audience who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Friends and colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, my name is Joe Keenan. I recently started up an organization called Chronic Life Media, which is sort of my latter phase career move after working in for many health-related nonprofits over the
Mm-hmm.
years, both full-time and consulting. Um, I wanted to really work on something where I was actually creating something and putting it out in the world, uh,
Mm-hmm.
versus working for organizations, clients where I'm actually behind the scenes doing a lot of the same work, but it's really their brand. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like there was an opportunity with Chronic Life Media to tell stories about patients and how they navigate their chronic illness, rare disease, disabilities in kind of an interesting and new way. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I kind of landed at starting Chronic Life Media. And we're at the very beginning. We have one documentary short that we're developing, as you know, since you're the subject. Um, but that's really, um, and I could talk more about what our plans are and how this
Mm-hmm.
film can kind of flow into the next steps and things like that. But that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, it definitely like I think I told somebody the other day, I'm like, yeah, I was in this documentary and they kind of look at me like, wait, what did you just say? Like, who just like casually says that? I'm like, yeah, it was cool. It was fun. It was all about me. But it was really funny when you were like, hey, I've got this idea, I want to run this by you. Would you be
uh,
interested? And I was
yeah,
like, yeah, sure. Cause I'm like, why not? That sounds like fun. And then afterwards, I'm like, wait, what did I just commit myself to? But it was a lot of fun and a lot of work, mostly because I had to run during it. So it was
right,
a
right.
lot of work, but it's it's a really cool concept and I think that it'll be not just because it's like my story is not the cool concept. I mean, I think so, but I like the idea behind it because it shows the other side of chronic illness and it shows the other sides of the people that make up chronic illness just beyond, maybe what you see. It talks about their
Yes.
interests, who they are, maybe what they do outside of advocacy or whatever it is that they do with their life. So it's just a really cool thing that you're doing and I'm
It,
honored to be a part of it.
yeah, I mean, the whole, I have to admit that I really didn't, for once in my life, overthink and overplan what, like the first, project would be. And
Mhm.
I tuned into this podcast, your podcast on Spotify, and I don't even remember if I just chose something at random, but I just happened to land on uh, and watched the podcast where you told the story about your doctor when you had one of the nasty infections,
Mhm.
and your doctor said, "Well, part of the reason, or maybe the reason that you were able to get through that was from strength that you had developed from your distance running and training."
Mhm.
And I was like, "That's it." And the reason it's sort of just I didn't think about it anymore, other than that. Well, I was an avid distance runner for years,
Mhm.
so there was a running connection, but still, I just didn't overthink it. Like, okay, there's a story here, and if Sam agrees, I think this will be great. The other thing that you mentioned, like you didn't sort of know what you're getting into. Neither did I. I had a general idea of how this might work, but it wasn't until
Mhm.
we had I got the team together, the creative team with Lauren and Austin, the cinematographer, this guy Ben, the sound guy, and a couple other people, Alex, this guy Alex, who uh, it wasn't until I got them together and started to really think it through that that it that I learned like what is this actually going to be.
Mhm.
So that was an interesting part of it. Um, So yeah, so that was kind of the origin, and again, it's not much of an origin story for the idea. It's just like
Yeah.
this seems like it's going to be a really interesting story.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Kinda like, "This sounds fun, let's give it a try." That's kind of how I operate now,
yeah,
where I'm like, "This sounds like a good idea, I wanna just do it before I have enough time to, like, think it through, so that way I don't talk myself out of it or talk like, too much what ifs, too many different scenarios." I'm like, "Let's just do it, and let's see what happens," and
yeah.
that's basically what happened when you were like, "Hey, do you wanna do this?" I was like, "Yeah, sure," like, I
Well,
don't know what I'm getting myself into, but let's do it.
I mean, I think I have to say that, part of it too was just that again, I know you from work
Mhm.
and even from other projects that we were working on at one point with a couple other people.
Yeah, it's been a
And
long
I
time.
think, yeah, I think the other thing too is just I know you that you're like a super advocate. You're obviously very um, knowledgeable about the conditions, the diseases you have. Um,
Mhm.
I heard you talk about your relationship with your healthcare team, and then self advocacy, all those things, and then you like to talk, like you 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 like to articulate, you know what's going on, and I think that to me was important because you're a storyteller and you're
Mhm.
able to convey things that you're going through, both like physical challenges, and you're not afraid to talk about the mental challenges. So I have to say, like, you taking that all kind of ran through my head very quickly as to help say, yeah, this could be the great story to launch Chronic Life Media with.
Yeah, which I like I said, I was and am honored to have participated in this, and I know, I'm glad that I had already been doing the podcast when you had asked me because I think I would have been a lot more hesitant to be on camera at that point. Because now I'm a little bit desensitized to it, and also going through those shoot days made me feel more comfortable here too, because I'm like, if I can run on camera, like, if I can put that vulnerability on camera, like, I thought I was vulnerable here, I'm like, "Wait till you see what I talk about over there," where it was
Yeah,
like, "I
yeah.
can do anything now, like, ask me anything, and I'll probably give you a way more detailed answer than you actually were asking for,
And
but that's just what you get when you ask me questions."
well, and again, like that's what we need because we need is we need it's easy to well, it's not easy, but we needed to get a lot of footage, both
Mhm,
interviewing you, your husband Adam, your mom, um,
mhm,
and then and the B-roll and all that other footage. And so it's a challenge, but you have to have a wealth of content, to be
mhm,
able to then put the story together. And so if it was the opposite, where you were hesitant to talk about issues and things like that, and we had to pull it out
mhm.
of you, that would be extremely hard to do.
Yeah,
So I think,
yeah,
like, the lesson I learned there too is for the next stories that we do, um, I have like a set of criteria to help evaluate the people that we're going to work with.
that makes
I,
sense,
I don't
yeah.
mean like, I just mean that in a way of like a story may be very compelling, but if they're real camera shy, that might not work. You know?
Yeah, it's hard to get it across. It's like if you have something really good to say, but you're too shy to say it, the
Right.
words and that story aren't going to be out there. And I know that I've gone through different like periods in my life of when I want to share something, how I want to share something, and with this platform, I'm a lot more comfortable sharing more to like strangers than I am the people that I almost know personally, because the people that are considered strangers are part of like the niche community that we all live in, right? So where if I talk about this experience that I had, somebody out there is going to be like, "Oh, I went through something similar," where people in the everyday life or the non-chronically ill or relatively healthy people are like, "What even are you talking about? I've never experienced that." So
Yeah.
it's almost easier to share and be vulnerable, be comfortable talking about those things because you never know who's listening. I remember years ago when I still used Twitter and Twitter was still Twitter and not whatever the heck it is now. But I posted something about hypoparathyroidism on there. And for those that don't know, that's an even more super rare disease that I live with, and somebody sent me a message on Twitter and was like, "I've never met another person or talked to anybody else that has this. Like, you have it?" And we had this whole conversation because I just randomly posted something in a social media post because I was sick of something or mad about something, and I just wanted to get it out there. So it's like you don't know who's listening, who's going to hear that and who's going to see that. And I think that films like this and stories like this and people willing to talk about their stories like this are more impactful than we realize the further out that they go. And stories where you have incorporated other people, caregivers, family members,
Yeah.
it's not just other, like, sick people. Like, this isn't just a story, and not even just mine, for every future story that you put together, it's not just for the chronically ill. It's for their caregivers, it's for their loved ones, friends, family, healthy people to look at a story of resilience, endurance, or whatever thing
Yes.
that they're doing that they wanna get out. It's not just for one subset of people, it's for anyone who wants to
Yeah.
listen to a good story.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. And that's one of the things that sort of began to appear as we shot the film and
Mhm,
started looking at the transcripts and things. So yeah, the way there's two things really. One is that um, I use the word multidimensional versus one-dimensional, and what we're really trying to do is if you look at patient stories now, for the most part, video series, things that other nonprofits have developed or even pharma sponsored. And this is not to slam them at all. There's a real place for one-on-one interviews with patients, where they're
mhm.
talking
Yeah, we've
about their,
done them.
yeah, we've done them, we
Mhm,
talk about their conditions, talk about maybe either self-advocacy or legislative advocacy. There's a real place for that. But we kind of looked at with Chronic Life Media that there was a gap in that there wasn't a real um, any kind of stories. I'm sure they're there. You would have to find them, but where I would call it braiding, a braiding in or integrating in the what you just mentioned is life, the life beyond the chart. So everybody
mhm,
has goals. People have goals, dreams, um, things they do to find flow to creative
mhm.
endeavors, projects, and just because you have a chronic illness, a rare disease, or you're disabled doesn't mean that, you don't do those things or pursue those things. So we want to tell
Yeah.
a holistic story and show how these things are sort of braided together. And,
Mhm,
and I think that we've done that with your film. Um, and then the second thing that, just to refer back to what you're saying in terms of the universal themes, and this didn't really strike
mhm,
me until again we went through a couple shoots and and Lauren and the cinematographer Austin were talking about how is the story evolving. It actually evolved a little differently than we thought.
mhm,
Again, this is what is fun about creative projects, you know.
mhm,
And what started for me, what I started to see was the universal themes coming out of this in terms of um, the pivot. And you and Adam use the word pivot a lot. It's a good
mhm.
word because you just
We
up
did a
there's
lot of that.
yeah, there's ups and downs, there's setbacks and
Mhm,
adjustments have to be made given, your nutritional needs and the other things that
mhm,
you're challenged with. There's the invisible illness aspect that where if I were sitting on a plane, you were sitting next to me on a plane, I would have no idea that you're a person that has to go through all these things every
yep,
day.
yep,
The motivational, the inspiration part of it of just watching somebody uh, navigate and find ways to continue to train or to pull back and adjusting the self-advocacy part of it. I'm going to say teamwork because Adam and your mom are very much part of this, and I'm sure there's other
mhm,
people in your lives. um, Perseverance was another thing. It's just like you're so focused on, even though maybe you didn't reach your ultimate goal, you still persevere towards another goal, And then
mhm,
finally, the one theme that I think is universal is acceptance. And so
yeah,
those themes can apply to anyone, not just
Mhm.
somebody who's facing chronic illness. And so why I think, again, your story, I wasn't thinking of this when we said, oh, this is the story. So maybe it was just like intuition, but um, so really anyone can look at this and go, like, if they're training for a marathon and they have a setback, an injury, well, look at this person did,
Mhm.
so that was something that really kind of came out through the process.
Yeah, and we talk a little bit more about that with Lauren in the second half of this episode to kind of dive into the like creative process and what the pivoting, since we love that that word so much,
Right.
on that end did as the story unfolded a little bit differently than we expected. And
Right.
it was interesting for me because you don't know how you want to present something. And I think anybody who has something that they want to share, especially around chronic illness. Like, you don't want to be too negative, right? Like, you don't want to just live in the bad parts of what it's like living with chronic illness. And sometimes life feels like a series of bad parts. It's like never ending, and there are times in our lives that are like that. But like you said, that's not just applicable to chronic illness, but for us it really feels that way when you have a chronic illness and you're honest about the realities of what you're dealing with. People look at you, they're like, well, maybe if you weren't so negative, you would feel better or things would be better, if you just pretend or you try harder. And we're sitting here like, I'm just surviving, dude. Like, you don't know what try harder feels like. So for me, trying to decide, like, do I want to talk about like that really bad shit? Do I really want to talk about that? It's like, well, yeah, but I also want to talk about like the inspirational stuff, right? Or the things
Yeah.
that I can do. But if you lean too heavy into that, then it looks way too toxic positivity. And I'm like, where do I go? Like, how do you want me to present myself today? Like, not even just
Right.
you guys, but even to me, to anybody. I'm like, what do you want from me? So I think you and Lauren did a really good job at helping me find a healthy balance between the reality, the not so pretty pictures, but also the things that are inspirational that lead you into acceptance and to kind of bounce between that, because the
Mm.
the lines are always moving, right? Like, you're not always over here, you're not always over here, and it really helped me not feel like I had to land in one camp. Like, I could be both things at the same time,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to choose. And I felt like the questions that you guys decided on, as the different themes and topics emerged, it allowed me to just be authentically myself. If I wanted to tell you something sad, you were like, all right, let's talk about it. If I wanted
Right.
to tell you something really great, you're like, let's talk about it. So I'm hoping that that comes off when you guys are in the final piece, because I've
Yeah.
only seen bits and pieces. So
Right.
I'm excited to see the final cut, but I hope that that comes
Well,
out for people.
yeah, I mean, yeah, very well said. I think, first of all, let me say that 99% of that credit goes to Lauren, not me. So my role in this
She'll
was
appreciate that.
my role in this was, you know, starting up the organization, self-funding the first film, and um, and certainly, yeah, I had input, but and I really thought about this a lot when I was sort of preparing for this talk. um, that Lauren put a ton of prepping into this, and I know that you were
Yeah,
involved
she
because I
did.
think she had some phone calls with you and
Hmm.
shared information with you in terms of the approach. And I went to the first shoot it's last September for that day. I was there most of the day, and
Yeah, we
my
had a
my
full house.
yeah, your whole house was sort of taken over by people and equipment, and I sat. I really, was not. I let the team do what they're doing because they're the
Hmm.
professionals, and I had little input. I didn't need to have input there, but but I was watching and listening, to how Lauren. At, it's an art to ask questions, really to
Yeah.
get the right questions that are going
Yep.
to get you talking as opposed to, yes and no or whatever. And but also I recall, during even after that Lauren checking in when sometimes you weren't feeling that well, you know what I mean, and
Hmm.
they made adjustments to the schedule or called it a
Yep.
day. So
Yep.
she was very sensitive to making sure that you were comfortable and during the different shoots. So uh, that's also, I think, the reason why, again, you were saying that that fine line and talking about uh, being positive and being negative and stuff.
Hmm.
And I think well, you'll see it, the film, but I'm sorry you haven't seen it yet. But I think that that the reason that works in the film is because of all the prep work that
Yeah.
Laura did. And again, that prep work involved also talking to uh, the other crew members about, behind, like, sort of huddling, saying,
Hmm.
how do we shift to make sure we get what we need today. So that whole creative process, I found it fascinating. I had fun with it. I really liked the camaraderie of the crew.
Yeah.
They're like, they were having fun, and we've been through a lot in the different our work experiences, that it makes
Hmm.
a whole heck of a lot difference when people are love what they do, and we can have fun
Yeah.
at it. So it
Yeah.
was
It really was
that was a
fun.
great day. I didn't get to the other shoots,
Hmm.
but that was a great day.
Yeah, it really was. And I think I talk a little bit more about this with Lauren in the next episode, but I for never have doing this before and having like no experience or anything, like I was definitely overwhelmed, but not in a bad way. Like everybody was comfortable. And for anybody else that might be a part of this process, like I think of it like if I can do something like this and anybody can, and it's because of the environment as well. And like you said, that prep work and going into something, knowing to the best of my ability what to expect, because, with anything, you have to expect the unexpected. And since we
Yeah,
were doing it as we go, we're always on our toes. And, it was I think actually for me, the best part was as we were running and, we're mic'd up and everything. And Adam and I are just running through and I'm like, sorry guys, as I'm heavy breathing. And at one point I had to stop and I'm like dry heaving and I'm like, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm like, this is gonna make great commentary as I'm like
that's not in the
trying
film.
not to vomit, trying to sit there. I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I'm not gonna throw up. I'm really
Yeah,
sorry, guys, and like coughing and just it was just really like fun because I knew that they could hear me too, which for
yeah,
me, I'm like, they're probably cracking up in the van as they're, filming and we're going through. But it just the whole thing was so much. And I definitely did not expect as long of a day as it was. I'm like, yeah, it'll just be a couple
yeah.
hours. I'm like, no, it wasn't. But that's okay because it was
Yeah.
it was good. It
No, we
was
were nervous
fun.
about. I'm sorry. Yeah, we were nervous about that, and also just I didn't realize how much of an invasion it would be into your home, and you guys were gracious
Maisie was
and
the only one who was like, "Get out my house, guys."
the other thing about that first day, and I don't know if it was the first day. Yeah, it was, because I got there later in the morning. That was the day
Mhm.
that was an immense amount of fog,
Yep.
and that lent this sort of great atmosphere for your
Mhm.
training, and that footage we got, and that's in the film. And I turned to Alex and said, like, how did you guys arrange to have all this fog? I just was joking. And he's like, do you realize like how lucky you are to have this? He goes, if this were a movie set and we had to create it, it would be like hundreds of thousands of dollars to create this fog.
Yeah.
So it was like
Yeah.
a amazing thing
Mhm.
to see that. So
Yeah, that was pretty cool to even for us, we're like, "This isn't normal." Like, we don't usually these morning runs haven't been this foggy, and, we're thinking they're like, "Can they even see us?" And I'm wearing, like, bright colors because I do anyway when I run, so I'm
right, right.
visible, but it just was really funny because after when we're talking about that, I'm like, "Oh, yeah." It's like, okay, so
Yeah.
heavy breathing, lots of fog, really, really authentic, like, as authentic as it's gonna get. But it just was definitely an experience to go through and really like as invasive as it could have been a lot more invasive. Like it was just enough of like what you expected and
Yeah.
just trying to figure out what to say and how to say it, but I do think that being in your own home too definitely made me more comfortable just because I was in my own environment. You know, we were
Yeah, that's
in
a good point.
my hometown, we were in, you know, where we live and my home, and it really just was like I'm safe in my home to talk about the things that are hard. I'm safe here to have these conversations, and you know, knowing some of what we were gonna talk about and going over that too, like, helped me mentally prepare, like, there wasn't some crazy off the wall question just to, like, see the reaction sorta thing, you know,
Yeah,
that Lauren asked. So it was good because we all kinda knew what we were getting ourselves into to the best of our ability, and
right.
I can't wait to see it.
And if it had been interviews in, in a building, in a room somewhere, just
Mhm.
again, that's not the medium that we chose. We chose
Yeah.
documentary shorts, and the other thing that has been very interesting about the process is the length of the film. And at first, we thought our limit was like 20, 22 minutes. And Lauren and
Mhm.
I did some research, and we're looking at other films, and um, and we kind of just found that anything that's longer, we look at a film for what is the story, and what are we, what are we kind of getting out of it, and how does that, and what is the length, what is the length, what does the length of the film play into that,
Mhm.
and we kind of discovered that once your mind begins to sort of wander a little bit, whether you're reading a book, watching a movie, watching a documentary, it's kind of the danger zone. And so uh, Lauren immediately was like, we can't be over 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so that became the target. And after I saw like a rough cut that was like 22 minutes, I realized that she was exactly right. It The art of this is the editing and the editor and the director working together to, as I said, like maybe up front, of getting it down to its essentials and telling that story
Mhm.
as succinctly as possible, both, but not missing anything, but getting it really tight so that it's engaging every minute of the film, Um,
Yeah.
so that was that's another like takeaway for me of getting, getting involved in this whole process is that is and you think it's like this not possible, and then when you see another 15-minute cut, you like, oh, it works perfectly, it's almost there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's been interesting.
Being being the part of it that I was and knowing how much we filmed, I still like I think that's why I'm excited to see the final cut is because I'm like, "What did you cut? How did you figure it out?" You know, because 'cause I'm like,
Yeah,
I know I told you a lot of stuff and there was a lot of different pieces, like
yeah,
even running, I'm like, "How do you decide what part you wanna keep and what don't you
oh
wanna
yeah,
keep?"
yeah,
So it's definitely a process that is not easy, and you know what you had as an idea, and you know we had said this earlier of like a theme you had in mind, but then things change a little bit and you're like, okay, well now maybe I want part A instead of part B, or no, but I really like part B, like how did we
yeah.
choose? And that's a process for people, not me, because I'd be like, let's
Well,
have a 5-hour movie all about Sam. Like
there's a couple examples. One example in the film is that um, your mom interviews when you and your mom were talking, and
hmm
and that was a really critical part of the film. But it kind of landed abruptly. So they had
hmm
to kind of figure out how do we transition into that. So
yeah.
again, this is a creative skill set that obviously I don't have, and I would say there's just everybody's critical, the cinematographer, the director, the editor, production support, and all. But the two things that really are critical to me are uh, the editor who's putting together the story. And again,
hmm
you will see the expertise because it's blending together footage, the interviews, B-roll, transitions. A lot of the
yeah.
images you gave us were essential
hmm
because we needed those for sort of transitional elements. Um,
yeah.
and then sound. And Ben, who's the sound guy, you know, he captured the sound perfectly. If you don't have good sound in a documentary or any video, you're dead.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
so really all these experts coming together. Again, like I'm like a little boy, sort of excited about something that I really didn't know a lot about, and that
Mhm.
and I think so huge learning experience for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's so cool.
throughout.
So so what's next after the final cut? Because I know we're getting closer to that. So what
Right.
is next for the
Yes.
film?
That's a big question I get from a lot of people. Well, first we've entered it into the Woodstock Film Festival,
Mhm.
which is in October. And we did so because, well, this is in Hudson Valley. Some of your training runs were in Wyndham. You're
Mhm.
from there, so there's the real New York State, Hudson Valley, Catskills connections. So and the crew is all New York based,
Mhm.
Hudson Valley based. So or mostly. So we really felt like we think we have a great film. So we've entered into that festival, but it's not necessarily kind of a festival film that we're going to enter it into like 50 festivals. Um,
Mhm.
but that seemed like a natural. And the next steps are really for me. Uh, I have to really begin more business development to try to find sponsors who may help underwrite the cost of this film. But equally important is that we're using this as uh, a bridge, if you will, to raise money for the next film. So the next
Mhm.
film won't be self-funded by me. We have to raise the money before we make it,
Yeah.
and then um, I also am putting together a marketing and distribution plan that's going to be a series um, of virtual screenings,
Mhm.
presentations to potential funders, um, and we also want to build around it like a QA discussion guide, and
Mhm.
we feel like that's kind of a no-brainer because there's, like I said, I mentioned those themes, and you've mentioned a few yourself, so there's quite an opportunity to create like a little discussion guide. So our hope is like to also hit up conferences to try to get space at health related conferences like the Digestive Disease Conference, and
Mhm.
others to uh, get into a partnership where we don't really have to pay anything, but we can get on there. We can get a room and set up a viewing, invite people. Uh, Perhaps if you're available, have you talk. So
Mhm.
it's going to be a multifaceted distribution campaign, and it's going to be focused more on building awareness and getting viewings as opposed to trying to raise money. Um,
Yeah.
and but any money we raise, obviously, would be gladly accepted.
Yeah. Like, so with everything else, and once someone watches it, what do you feel is something or what's something important to you that or that you hope someone would take away from watching this like after they're done? Whether they're, it doesn't matter so much if they're a healthcare professional, I'll say a regular person, chronic illness person, what's something that you hope people take away from this?
You know, I think uh, I need to think about that a little bit. I'll start by saying that the um, what's in our favor is that we talked about the various universal themes, and I
Mhm.
think audiences um, are going to get different messages from this, right? And so it
Mhm.
kind of depends on who they are and where they are sort of in their journey. Um, but overall, I think the takeaway is the main takeaway. I think is that people will see this the perseverance, but also just the acceptance of okay, I'm not going to reach this goal, but I now have another goal, that's
Mhm.
related to it. Um, and I guess that's it. Like, I really think that's the main takeaway is that there's going to be setbacks and you can kind of grieve those. And I think in the film, you sort of like, you have this like quick little grieving and then you're like, but now I'm going to do this.
Mhm.
Um, I think the other thing too is like, um, it's your kind of sort of being honest with yourself, but also your ability to sort of like um, move on with a sense of humor. And I think
Dark humor.
again, again, yeah, yeah, it can be dark. And I think that's, there's so many little those nuances. So it's hard to say if there's just one thing, you know. Um, I feel like, I've heard from our colleagues and others that are much more educated about and involved in patient advocacy that um, that potential sponsors, funders, brands, they they want you have to have that kind of multi-dimensional story,
Mhm.
and and they'll lean towards that in terms of pumping out like quick videos on YouTube. So I think
Yeah.
so for example, so a potential sponsor, a brand like a running brand that we're gonna go reach out to some of the running brands, the apparel that you use.
Mhm.
Um, we're telling them, we're showing them that uh, this is a well-rounded, multifaceted kind of story, and then
Yeah.
their brand is part of that. So like
Mhm.
my hope is that they take away that we've made a significant investment in creating something that's really engaging that people can learn from, as opposed to
Mhm.
sort of that one-dimensional thing that's really just about a very specific thing, about a condition or a treatment or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rambling, but that I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. I think, what I initially thought somebody would take away from, the questions or the ideas that we had of what we were going to talk about, like, I know what I think somebody would take away from it, or I think of like when I interview a patient and I talk about something, I'm like, if you were listening to your own story, what do you want someone to take away from this? Like, what's important to you about your story? Or is there a certain moment that you want to share of resilience that you want somebody to lean into when they need to be resilient or when they need that little pick me up or inspiration, or whether it's being or feeling validated in your own journey when it gets really hard and people maybe don't believe you because you have an invisible illness, right? Like, I think about those moments when I'm talking to somebody. So, thinking about all the things that I said and all the pieces of my story and everything that I shared, like, I hope that people look at their lives and just realize that, like, even though what's happening to you is not what you expected, or the thing that you want feels so far away, it's
Hmm.
not impossible. It's just
Right.
that very cliche thing that, like, take another road. It's like maybe you don't run there, but maybe you walk there. Like,
Right.
getting that goal isn't always impossible, it's sometimes just different. And, like, I had every reason and every right to give up every single time I chose not to,
Right.
and it would have been fine if I chose to. It was valid, it was understandable, and it would have been okay. And there's nothing wrong with that choice either. I just chose the opposite. I chose for a different route, a different way of doing things, and I hit my goal differently than I would have expected with any half marathon that I ran. None of
Yes.
them went good.
Right.
None of them were easy. They were all like all over the place, and you always have to make adjustments. And I think like being able to adapt to what's happening to you is
Absolutely.
that reminder that I want someone to take away from this. Is like, bad things are going to happen. We can't get around that. So what do we do in the meantime? And it's okay
Yeah.
to acknowledge that bad shit happens,
Yeah.
because not acknowledging it isn't going to make it go away, and acknowledging it too much can make you feel stuck in it. But you have to acknowledge it to a degree, and that doesn't make you any less of a person. Like, walking away from something that's hurting you doesn't make you any less of a person, but continuing on in a different way that protects your peace, protects your physical and mental health, and
Hmm.
doing it in a way that works for you, that's okay too. It's just
Yeah.
figuring out what works for you and doing that thing. Like, you are more than your illness. And I think that's a key thing for me that I want everybody to
Well,
know. Like,
I I appreciate you
there
giving me
there's
all
so
that
much there.
that that messaging is spot on. I'm going to use that in our marketing materials. It's true. I mean, it makes sense coming from you, having lived it but I don't want to give away the ending of the film or anything, but um by any means, but that's so true. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love it.
it's it's just that idea for anybody, and I talk about this with Lauren too, of like you can have, and this goes for anybody doing anything, right? But especially for running marathons, half marathons, like you can have perfect training. You can hit every run perfectly. You can eat everything perfectly. You could do everything perfectly. You show up on race day, and guess what? It is so much more humid than what you trained in. And guess what? That race is going to be that much harder. And you
Yeah.
might not hit the goal that you thought you were going to hit because your training went perfect. Or
Yes.
your training, like mine always is, was all over the place. You had no idea what was going to happen on race day, and you PR something and you're like, holy shit, that was great. That happens
Yeah.
to regular people too. You
So true.
never know what you're going to expect. And I think just
Yeah.
learning how to adapt and accepting that there are some things that are far out of your control make
Yeah.
it easier to control the things that are well within your control.
Yeah. I
And
think
that's
the
your attitude, your output,
Yeah.
and how you're looking at it.
Yeah. The acceptance is a key word. I know that
Mhm.
Lauren ran the New York City Marathon several years ago, and it was one of the
Mhm.
most humid days ever. And
Yeah, we
it just
commiserated over that a
yeah,
couple
and it's
times.
just just the reality of like, okay, I'm just gonna have to do this as a training run. I mean, because
Mhm.
you just can't compete in that
Yep.
weather. But
Yep.
yeah, I think like I said, I think there's a number of different takeaways. It's broader than just patience, and really, this will as we begin to promote the film and get feedback, we're going to do some private showings as well to get feedback, not to edit the film further, but to help us with that positioning, and kind of messaging
Mhm.
that you just articulated. And um, and I really, that's going to be a learning experience too, just to see, so we
Yeah.
can apply that learning to the next one that we do. The
Mhm.
main concern or main challenge will be how do we, um, when we get funding and we start to do more of these, how can we do it faster? This project started in September, even before September. The first shoot was September 2025.
Mhm.
So it's going to be almost a year. Um, and
Yeah.
I think in the future, we need to try to do it a little bit faster. But that'll help when we have more money, because
Mhm.
this crew did not take their day rates. And so
Yeah.
I salute them for that, because it wouldn't exist without that.
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
they were great, and I know they put in a lot of time and effort, and I know Ben got paid in some candy from my candy bowl. So we we tried to,
Whatever it
help
takes.
sweeten the pot there a little bit, but thank you for sharing everything today. It's been fun to
My
relive
pleasure.
some of this, and I want to remind everybody to stay tuned for part 2 with Lauren, because if you stay tuned, you might just get a sneak peek
Oh.
into the really fun film that we're talking about. So thanks again, Joe. This was fun.